What do you do when your wife sits at your own kitchen table and calmly says she wants to date other men, but still come home to you and your child? How long can you stay quiet while she tells her friends and family that you are the controlling villain for not agreeing to be her safety net? And what happens when, after enough late-night notes and quiet planning, the first time she realizes you were serious is when someone hands her legal papers at the school pickup line? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Corin Vale, and my wife told me she wanted to date other men while still coming home to me and our daughter. She said it in our own kitchen, with her phone face down on the table and a glass of wine in her hand, like she was talking about changing jobs or repainting a room. She said she wanted to feel chosen again, to explore, to see what was out there. She also said she expected me to understand, to support her, and to stay married while she did it. When I said I could not live like that, she decided the real problem was my thinking, not her request. Very quickly, I became the villain in the story she told her friends and family. She said I was controlling, old-fashioned, scared of modern love. Online, she posted small hints that made me look like a cage and her like a bird that deserved the sky. In front of our daughter, she said I was stopping her from growing. I did not hit anything, I did not shout. I slept in the guest bed, kept my voice calm, wrote dates and words in a quiet file, and waited for the day when paper, not feelings, would decide what happened next. Everything shifted did not look dramatic from the outside. The dishes were already washed, the television was off, and our daughter Leah was in her room coloring little stars on the corner of her homework. The apartment was quiet in that thin way it gets before someone decides to say something big. Jenna stood at the kitchen table with a half-full glass of wine and her phone lying face down beside it, like she did not want to look distracted, only important. I sat across from her with my hands around a mug of cooling tea, thinking we were going to talk about bills or Leah's school project. Instead, she said she needed more from life, and that we had to talk about other men. At first, I did not understand what she meant. She said she loved me, loved Leah, loved our home, and did not want to lose any of it. Then she said she also wanted to feel chosen again, to go on dates, to see who else was out there. She said she was tired of pretending she did not notice other men looking at her, tired of feeling like marriage had closed doors she was not ready to shut. She said she wanted to explore and experience, but she did not want to break up the family. In her mind, these lines were open for negotiation. In my mind, they were the whole shape of the marriage. I asked her, as calmly as I could, if she was talking about an open relationship. She said she did not like that word because it sounded cheap. She said she just wanted to date sometimes, have drinks, maybe see where things go, but always come back home. She said I should feel secure enough in myself and in us to allow that. She said if I really trusted her, I would not need details, I would just let her have the space and not ask questions. She spoke like she was explaining a modern concept to someone old and slow. I told her, in a steady voice, that I understood her words, but I could not agree to what she was describing. I said I could not share a marriage bed with someone who saw dating other men as a hobby she was owed. I said I did not want to control her, but I also did not want to live in a home where I had to pretend that loyalty meant something different now. She shook her head and said I was making everything dramatic, that I was turning a simple ask into a crisis. She said most men would be grateful their wives came home at all. While we talked, Leah walked out of her room holding a paper star. She felt the air before she heard our words. She asked if we were arguing about friends. Jenna told her it was just grown-up talk, and that Dad was feeling old-fashioned. She smiled when she said it, but it did not reach her eyes. I told Leah we were discussing how grown-ups should act when they are married, and that it had nothing to do with her. She looked from one of us to the other for a long second, then went back to her room without saying more, holding her star like it might keep something in the air from cracking. After Leah closed her door, Jenna said I was already poisoning our daughter against modern ideas, just because I would not agree to her plan. She said my face made it clear I thought she was doing something wrong. I answered that I thought the idea was wrong for me, and that I was allowed to say no. That was when she moved from asking to blaming. She said I was trying to control her freedom, that I was afraid of other men, that my refusal proved I was insecure and more in love with a rule than with her. The more I stayed calm, the more she pushed. She said if I kept this up, she would have to think about whether she could stay with someone so limited. I wanted to shout back that asking your husband to accept your dating life was not freedom, it was selfishness. I wanted to tell her that being loyal was not a cage. It was a choice we had both made when we said our vows. Instead, I kept my mouth closed until my jaw hurt. I looked at the table and counted my breaths. When I finally spoke, my voice stayed low. I told her that if she wanted to date other men, I could not stop her, but I would not be her safety net while she did it. I said we could not live both lives at once. She stared at me like she had never really seen me before and said I was threatening divorce just because she wanted to feel alive. She finished her wine in one sharp swallow and said she was going to bed because she was tired of defending basic needs. She told me I should think about why I was so afraid of her being wanted. I did not answer. I sat there and listened to her footsteps moving down the hallway, the soft sound of the bedroom door closing, the small click that turned the kitchen into a different country from the room where my wife slept. The apartment felt larger and emptier at the same time. After a while, I stood up and walked to the corner of the living room where we had squeezed in a small desk and chair. We called it the office, even though it was just a nook with a lamp and a cheap laptop. I opened the laptop and waited for the screen to light up. The desktop was mostly clear, just a few folders from old projects. My fingers hovered over the touchpad for a second, then I opened a new spreadsheet. I typed a simple header with the date. In the first row, I wrote, "Kitchen, evening. Jenna said she wanted to date other men and still stay married. I said I could not accept this. No extra words, no insult, no analysis. Just what had been said." Then I picked up my phone and opened the messages. I created a new thread addressed to myself and titled it Follow-Up. In the first message, I wrote one short summary. She asked for other men and still wanted our home. I said no. She called me controlling. I pressed send. The message moved up the screen and settled into place. I set the phone down on the desk for a moment and rubbed my eyes. The apartment smelled like dish soap and the faint perfume she had worn earlier. When I stood to turn off the kitchen light, I heard the bedroom door latch move again, like she had gotten up to check something. At the same instant, my phone buzzed softly on the desk and lit up with the preview of the message thread named Follow-Up, showing the single line I had just written. The glow from the screen and the sound of the latch overlapped in the quiet. Jenna's footsteps went back toward the bed, and she did not come down the hall. I looked at the lit screen, at my own words reflected in the glass, and knew that from now on I would not try to win this by arguing in circles. I would carry her sentences with me in that file, date by date, until the day came when someone else needed to read them. The next morning, the kitchen looked normal, but felt tilted. The coffee machine hummed, the toaster clicked, sunlight came in through the small window over the sink. Leah sat at the table with her hair still messy, building a tower out of cereal pieces. Jenna stood by the counter with her phone in her hand and that same half-done expression on her face, like part of her was already somewhere else. When I walked in, she said she had thought a lot about what she had told me and that I was overreacting. She said she was just being honest about her needs and that I had turned it into a drama. She put her phone on the table between us, face up now. A notification slid down from the top of the screen. Some friend had replied to a late-night post she made after our talk. I saw a few words before she flicked it away. Something about outgrowing old stories. She told me she had shared a vague post about wanting more in her life and that her friends had been very supportive. She said it proved that most people understood her and that maybe I was the one who needed to update my thinking. Leah asked what updating thinking meant, and Jenna said Dad was stuck in old rules, but would catch up. I told Leah we were talking about grown-up choices, not about her. On the way to drop Leah at school, Jenna scrolled through her feed. She smiled at replies and read some out loud. People called her brave for speaking her truth, said they were proud she was not shrinking herself for a man. No one in those comments knew what she had actually said in our kitchen. They knew only the version where she was a bird and I was a cage. When I pulled up near the school, she leaned over to kiss Leah's cheek and told her she had a fun day of content planning ahead. To me, she said that we could talk more about conditions later, but that I should really try to see this as a chance, not a threat. I said nothing. Leah waved from the gate, her backpack bumping against her shoulders, and I watched her walk away with small, steady steps that made my chest ache. At the co-working building, the air smelled like coffee and printer toner. I sat at my desk, opened my ticket system, and tried to lose myself in small problems. Around mid-morning, a colleague from another team rolled his chair over and said he had seen some interesting posts from Jenna. He showed me his phone. There she was, in a photo from our living room, soft light, wine glass in hand, captioned, "When your growth scares people who promised to love you." The comments under it were full of fire emojis and hearts. Some said she should never dim herself for a man again. My colleague laughed and said I must be having fun at home. I smiled a small, polite smile and said we were having big talks lately. He said at least my wife was hot and honest, and then went back to his desk. I asked him a few minutes later if he could send me the screenshot so I do not hear about it secondhand. When the message hit my inbox, I opened the image, saved it to a folder on my work computer with a plain name, then forwarded it to my private email. I took my time, making sure the date and timestamps were visible. After that, I opened a browser tab and checked my backup storage, confirming that the account was still active. Then I closed everything and went back to tickets when someone walked past my screen. Not long after, Evan appeared beside my desk. He asked if we could have a quick word. We stepped into the small meeting room with glass walls where we had performance talks and training. He said he had noticed I seemed distracted lately, slower to respond to requests, less present in meetings. He asked if things were okay at home. I told him there had been some emotional changes, and I was doing my best. He said he did not need details, but he wanted to make sure I had some space if I needed it. He suggested I put a recurring block in my calendar called Meeting Personal, maybe once a week, so people would not book over me if I needed a quiet hour. I thanked him and said I would do that. I meant it. Back at my desk, I opened my calendar and created a small block in the evenings, colored it light gray, and wrote Meeting Personal. Courtyard 7:30 p.m. in the title. It looked harmless, just another square on the screen, but it gave me a place to imagine something solid forming later. After I saved it, I opened my private email in another tab and watched as the screenshot of Jenna's post appeared in the inbox. I downloaded it to my cloud storage. A small pop-up in the corner whispered, "File uploaded successfully." I closed the tab before anyone could see. On my lunch break, I sat in the building's small courtyard with a sandwich in my hand and my phone in my pocket. I opened the thread named Follow-Up and added a few new lines. Date, coworker's comment, Evan's talk, name of the post, words from the caption. I saved it. Then I checked Jenna's profile again. She had added a second story, a cup of coffee, a notebook, the words "Planning my next chapter" written on top. Under it, a smaller line. Some people grow, some stay small and call it loyalty. I saved that too. On the way home, I stopped at the supermarket to pick up a few things. The bright lights made everyone look sharper, more exposed. In the aisle with the pasta, I ran into Nora. She smiled wide and said she had loved Jenna's post last night. She said it was about time someone spoke out about men who fear their wives having options. She asked if I was okay with Jenna exploring, then laughed and said I needed to get used to the new normal. I told her, in a quiet voice, that Jenna had said she wanted to date other men while keeping the marriage, and that I had said I could not accept that. Nora tilted her head and said that was not the way Jenna had described it. According to Jenna, I was panicking about her having friends again. I did not argue. I just nodded, picked up the pasta, and moved toward the checkout. At the register, while the cashier scanned items, I took out my phone and wrote a short note in follow-up. Supermarket, Nora repeated Jenna's version. I restated my boundary calmly. I saved it with my thumb, just as the cashier asked if I needed a bag. When I got back to the apartment, the hallway smelled like someone else's cooking from another floor. I put the groceries on the counter. 2 mugs sat on opposite ends of the surface, one with a faint lipstick ring, one plain. I aligned them without thinking, then left them where they were, realizing the distance was its own true picture now. I walked to the small home office nook, opened my laptop, and plugged in a slim USB stick I had bought months earlier and never used. I copied the spreadsheet with initials and dates onto it, along with a folder of screenshots from the past few days. When the transfer finished, a small box appeared on the screen confirming it was complete. I ejected the drive, opened the cabinet where we kept bills, and slid the USB into the back of a folder labeled Taxes, taping it flat so it would not move. As I closed the cabinet, I heard the front door open. Jenna came in talking into her phone, telling someone that her post had hit hard and that even people in old marriages were supporting her. She saw me and lowered her voice, saying she would call back. She told me she hoped I had had time at work to think about growing up a little. I said I had thought, and that my answer was still the same. I would not live in a marriage where one person was allowed to date outside it. I kept my tone level. She rolled her eyes and said she would not let my fear stop her. She went to the bedroom, and the door shut with that soft, final sound I was starting to know too well. As the latch clicked, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I took it out and saw 2 things appear at once on the screen. A calendar reminder for meeting, personal, Courtyard 7:30 p.m., and a notification from social media that I had been tagged in a new post. I opened the tag. It was a photo from last week, and Jenna smiling with a group of friends, my shoulder barely in the corner, captioned, "Choosing myself, even if it scares him." I looked at the picture, then at the quiet words of the calendar alert above it. 2 stories on one small screen, both true in their own way. One loud, one almost silent. I dismissed the reminders and understood that the louder her version became, the more careful my quiet notes would need to be, because someday only one of these stories would matter to someone outside our walls. The rooftop brunch was Nora's idea, but it might as well have been Jenna's stage. The invite popped up in our shared calendar as Sunday Reset, like it was about fresh starts and smoothies, but I knew better by then. Nora liked to gather people with good phones and big opinions. Jenna liked to be in the center of both. I went because Leah was spending the morning with my mother, and because saying no would have turned into another exhibit in the case against me, proof that I was isolating her. The elevator doors opened onto music, clinking glasses, and the bright scrape of 10 different conversations at once. Nora's rooftop had a strip of fake grass, some high tables, a few lounge chairs, and a view of the city that made everything look smaller than it felt. Jenna was already there when I arrived, in a dress she used to save for special occasions. She stood with a group of people from her online circles, a mimosa in her hand, her phone on the table, recording a slow pan of the view. When she saw me, she waved like we were in a sitcom and told everyone I had decided to join the modern world for the day. They laughed and shuffled to make space. I took a seat near the edge of the table, close enough to hear but far enough to breathe. Nora clapped her hands and said she wanted to get the real talk going. She looked at Jenna and asked how the big conversation at home was going. That was the signal. Jenna smiled with the confidence of someone who already knew the lines. She said she and I were working through her need to see other people casually while staying rooted in her marriage. She used words like ethical and transparent and growth. Then she said I was still adjusting and that it was hard for him to understand that love and freedom can live together. Heads around the table turned toward me. I felt the weight of their eyes like a hand on my chest. I said, in a normal voice, that I had not agreed to any open marriage, that we were still in disagreement about that. Jenna laughed lightly and told them I was still processing, and that it was cute how I clung to old rules. She said it the way people talk about children who still believe in fairy tales. A few people laughed with her. One friend lifted her phone and started recording, saying she wanted to capture this moment of honesty. Someone asked if I was afraid Jenna would find someone better if she dated. The tone was joking, but the words sat heavy. I answered that marriage, to me, meant choosing not to keep looking. I said it without anger. Nora rolled her eyes and said I was romantic in a very 1990s way. Another man at the table said I should be proud. My wife was still wanted. Jenna took that line and ran with it. She said she was grateful other men still noticed her, that it made her feel alive, and that I should be happy to benefit from that energy at home. She painted a picture where I was somehow lucky to have a wife who wanted to date as long as she came back at night. All the while, phones floated in the air, catching pieces of her speech and my still face. At one point, Nora stood up on her chair a little to get a better angle, raising her glass and announcing a toast. She said she wanted to celebrate women who refuse to shrink just because they got married. She pointed the camera at Jenna and told her to share one sentence of truth. Jenna looked straight into the lens and said she would never again make herself small for a man's comfort. The table cheered. In the edge of the frame, I knew my profile sat like a small gray rock next to all that color. I did not put my head down. I did not leave. I did what I had promised myself I would do. I observed. I watched who cheered the loudest, who only smiled politely, who looked uneasy for a second and then hid it. A woman I did not know well met my eyes briefly and then looked away, like she did not want to be caught on either side. I felt a strange calm settle over me, like cold water on hot skin. The more Jenna performed, the more I understood that none of this was about convincing me. It was about building a story she could point to later and say, "See, everyone knew." After a while, the conversation moved to lighter topics. People talked about work, travel, streaming shows. Jenna drifted from corner to corner, checking her recording, and posting small clips to her story, tagging people, shaping the morning into content. I stayed near the edge, answered when spoken to, and kept my own phone in my pocket. When a lull came, I excused myself and walked toward the small stairwell door that led back inside. In the stairwell, the sound of music dropped to a muffled thump. The concrete walls made everything feel more solid again. I took out my phone, opened the voice recorder, and spoke in a low voice. Date, rooftop brunch, Nora's toast, Jenna's sentence, my correction, their reaction. I described the camera, the cheering, the phrase about never shrinking for a man. I did not add adjectives about how it felt. I let the facts stand on their own. When I stopped the recording, the app made a soft beep. I gave the file a date and a simple label, then uploaded it to my cloud folder. A small message appeared at the top of the screen. File uploaded successfully. I watched it fade, then slipped the phone back into my pocket. When I pushed the door open to return to the roof, I heard Jenna's voice before I saw her. She was on her own phone near the far corner, telling someone that I had made things awkward by not playing along with the toast. She said I had looked like a sulky teenager and that she was so tired of managing his emotions. When she saw me, she ended the call quickly and put on a smile. She asked loudly if I was done hiding and if I was ready to join the human race. People laughed. I walked back to my seat and picked up my glass of water. By the time we left, the sun had shifted and the tables were littered with empty glasses. Nora hugged us both, whispering to Jenna that she was doing the brave thing and telling me to try not to punish her for being honest. Jenna's arm looped through mine as we headed to the elevator, but it felt like a grip, not a link. In the small metal box, she said she hoped I had taken the brunch as a lesson in where the world is now. I answered that I had taken it as information. She asked what that meant. I told her I had seen what I needed to see. My voice stayed calm. The elevator doors opened, and the question hung between us like unfinished music. At home, Leah ran to meet us with a drawing she had made at Maris's place. It showed 3 stick figures holding hands. She said it was our family. I praised her work and put the drawing on the fridge with a magnet. Jenna looked at it, then at me, her mouth tight, but she said nothing. Later, when Leah was in the shower, Jenna cornered me in the hallway and said I had humiliated her by not fully supporting her in front of her friends. She said I made her look like a woman trapped with a coward. I replied that I had only corrected one false statement, that we both wanted what she was describing. The rest, I had not fought. She told me again that if I did not evolve, she might have to leave. I said that if she decided to go, I would not stop her, but I would not share the house with her and her dates. I said it slowly, clearly. She called me dramatic and walked away, slamming the bedroom door hard enough to make a picture frame rattle. As the echo faded, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I took it out and saw a new notification. Nora had posted the brunch toast, tagging Jenna and adding the caption, "To women who won't shrink for small men." In the frozen frame, Jenna's glass was raised high, and my face sat at the edge, neutral and still. At the same time, a silent banner slid over the top of my screen from my cloud app. File uploaded successfully, linked to the audio note I had just recorded. 2 images, one on top of the other. My public role as the small man, and my private role as the one writing everything down. I stared at the stacked notifications and understood that the crowd had taken their positions now. They had chosen their lines. I did not need to argue with them. I only needed to be ready for the day someone else would listen to the quiet recording more carefully than they listened to the loud toast. The park on Saturday morning looked the same as it always did, but everything inside me felt different. Leah ran ahead of me with her small backpack bouncing against her shoulders, heading straight for the swings like she always did. The sky was clear, the benches were half full of parents with coffees and phones, and the ground under the slide still had that familiar rubber smell. I pushed Leah gently, listening to her laugh as she went forward and back, forward and back. For a few minutes, I let myself pretend that nothing had changed, that our biggest problem was getting grass stains out of clothes. Then Leah asked if Mom was coming, and the air tightened again. I told her Mom was getting ready and might meet us later. That was the story Jenna had given me. She had a quick coffee with a friend nearby and then might swing by the park. Leah seemed satisfied, at least for the moment. As I pushed the swing, I saw a familiar woman sit down on the bench next to the path, a neighbor from our building. She waved and said good morning. After a minute, she called out that she had seen Jenna the night before near a bar across town with that trainer guy from her stories, laughing and looking like a couple. She said it casually, like she was sharing friendly gossip. She had no idea she was dropping a small stone into water that was already rough. I thanked her, my voice as flat as I could keep it. Leah twisted in her seat to look at me. She asked why Mom was out with the gym man again, if Dad did not like it. She had seen his face in a few of Jenna's stories and remembered his name. I paused the swing and moved around to stand in front of her. I told her that sometimes adults made choices that did not match the promises they had made, and that Dad did not control Mom, he only chose what he could live with. I said none of it was her fault. She frowned and asked if we were still a family, if Mom wanted to date other men. The words were simple, but they went in deep. I told her that she and I would always be family, no matter what the grown-ups did. It was the only promise I could make without lying. Later that afternoon, we went to Jenna's parents' house for dinner. According to Jenna, they wanted to understand both sides and help us talk. According to the tone in her voice, they already had a side. The Cole house smelled like roast meat and scented candles when we walked in. The living room was tidy, the television off, the coffee table clear except for a bowl of nuts. That was my first warning. They had cleaned the battlefield. Arthur sat in his usual armchair, but his posture was straighter than normal. Denise hovered near the doorway with a dish towel in her hand, as if she might run back to the kitchen if things got too loud. We sat. Leah went to the corner with some crayons Denise had left out for her. After a few polite comments about work and school, Arthur started. He said Jenna had told them about our little crisis, and he wanted to remind us that marriage has to grow with the times. He said monogamy was a choice, not a prison, and that women today had different needs than women in his generation. He smiled, but his eyes were hard. He praised Jenna for being honest about wanting more instead of sneaking behind my back. He turned to me and asked if I really planned to throw away a whole family, because my wife wanted to explore while still loving me. I answered slowly. I said I did not want to throw anything away. I said I wanted a marriage where both people agreed that being married meant not dating other people. I repeated that I was not trying to control Jenna. I was only being clear about my boundary. Arthur shook his head and said I was afraid of losing control, that I was stuck in old rules that harm everyone. Denise chimed in and asked if I could not just look the other way a little, for Leah's sake, so she could have a united home. The idea that teaching my daughter to accept broken promises would keep her safe made my hands tighten on my knees. Jenna sat on the sofa beside her father, angled toward him like his co-counsel. She said she felt suffocated by my refusal to consider her needs, that she was doing the honest thing by saying what she wanted instead of cheating. She said if I really loved her, I would support her journey and not force her to choose between her growth and her family. She called my refusal emotional blackmail. She told her parents that I was writing things down, that I had a file somewhere on her. Arthur looked at me with surprise and something like disgust. He asked if it was true that I was keeping records of my own wife. I said I wrote things down when I was confused so I would not twist them later. He called that cold and unromantic, like I had confessed to a crime. Chloe sat on the edge of a chair near the wall, watching all of us. She did not jump in as quickly as she usually did. She looked at Jenna, then at me, then at Leah sitting on the floor with her crayons. I caught her eyes for a second. There was something different there, not full support, not full doubt, but the beginning of a question. When Arthur stepped out to answer his phone and Denise went to check on dinner, Chloe moved closer and asked quietly if it was true that Jenna wanted to date other men while staying married. I said yes. I did not add anything else. She looked at Leah, still drawing, and her mouth tightened. She said she hadn't realized it was that direct. Then Jenna came back into the room, and the moment ended. After dinner, Arthur asked to speak to me alone in the living room while the others cleared plates. He lowered his voice and said he wanted to be practical. He told me I had two options, adapt or step aside. Adapt meant accepting Jenna's dates as part of who she is now, staying in the house, and not making drama about it. Step aside meant leaving so Jenna could live fully and I could see Leah on a schedule. He said if I refused both, Jenna would have to choose her own path anyway, and I would just make myself look like the villain in everyone's eyes. I listened. When he finished, I said simply that I would not agree to live in a house where my wife dated other men, and I would not scream or break anything if she left. I said I would always show up for my daughter. That was all. Arthur frowned and said I was throwing away something most men would kill for. I thought of Leah's drawing at the park and the neighbor's casual words and wondered what exactly he thought I was supposed to be lucky about. Back at home, the apartment felt even smaller, as if the walls had moved half an inch closer. Leah went straight to her room, clutching the small toy Denise had given her. Jenna said she was exhausted and went to the bedroom without looking at me. I stood alone in the hallway, staring at the wall planner hanging near the kitchen. Empty squares stretched across the month. One of them, a date a few weeks away, seemed to glow in my mind. I took a red pen from the drawer and slowly drew a circle around it. The line was not perfectly smooth. My hand shook just enough to show. Then I took a small yellow sticky note and wrote 2 words in black ink. Bring forms. I did not yet know every detail of what those forms would be, or where exactly I would stand when they were finally in someone else's hands. I only knew I would not walk into that day unprepared. I stuck the note just beside the red circle, close enough that the 2 marks belonged together now. After that, I went to the small desk, opened my laptop, and checked the folders named Archive A and Archive B. The files sat there quietly. Screenshots, recordings, simple text summaries. I added a new entry to the spreadsheet with initials and dates. Park, Leah's question, neighbor's sighting, Cole living room, Arthur's ultimatum. On my phone, I opened the follow-up thread and typed a few short lines about the day. As I hit send, the message jumped into place. At that moment, I felt a presence in the doorway. I turned and saw Leah standing there, hugging her stuffed animal, looking from my guest bed to the closed door of the main bedroom and then to the planner on the wall. She asked if the day with the red circle was when I was going to stop living with them. The hallway went silent enough that I could hear my own heartbeat. Behind her, the sticky note bring forms lifted slightly at the edge in a small draft from the window, and my phone buzzed in my hand with a quiet reminder I had set earlier. Meeting, personal, courtyard, 7:30 p.m. Her question, the red circle, the soft vibration of the phone, all three landed together, and I understood that the next moves I made could not be about winning an argument. They had to be about building something solid enough to carry her through whatever came next. The weeks after the red circle appeared on our wall planner felt oddly slow and sharp at the same time, like walking through a room full of thumbtacks. On the surface, our routines continued: work, school, meals, laundry. But every small thing now carried a second, quieter meaning. In the mornings, the space between our mugs on the counter told the truth more clearly than any of Jenna's posts. She stood near the coffee machine with her phone already in her hand, reading jokes from friends about men who can't handle free women, laughing in a way that was meant for the screen more than for the room. Leah sat at the table, drawing again, looking up whenever the laughter turned into words about me. One morning, Jenna read a message out loud that called me the last gatekeeper of a dying system, like I was a museum relic, not her husband. She smiled at me and said her friend was totally right. I finished my coffee, rinsed my mug, and told Leah to grab her backpack. I did not answer the line. I just filed it away in the already crowded drawer in my head. At the gym, the story took on another shape. I went there one evening because I needed my body to feel tired enough that my mind might quiet down. In the locker room, two guys from another department were talking near the benches. They did not see me at first. One of them scrolled through his phone, laughing, and said he could not believe how cool Jenna was for trying poly stuff, while her man sulked in the background. The other asked to see, and the first one showed him a video of Jenna at some bar, smiling next to Ryan, both of them sweaty in the way people get after a workout and a drink. The caption said something about endless options. There was no mention of a husband or a child or a kitchen conversation where she asked to date other men while staying married. When they noticed me behind them, one of them grinned and said I was a legend for having that arrangement. I looked at the screen, asked him to send me the clip so we don't keep hearing different versions, and then turned away. The clip landed in my messages before I reached my locker. I saved it to my phone, then to the cloud folder. Another small pop-up whispered file uploaded successfully, as if the system itself knew how careful I needed to be. A few days later, the school hosted a small evening event in the community center hall. Student displays, a short talk about upcoming projects, juice and cookies. Leah was excited and wanted both of us there. Jenna said it would be good optics to come as a united front, using the phrase like we were a brand, not a family. The hall was bright and echoing, full of children waving their drawings and parents holding paper cups. Leah grabbed each of us by the hand and led us from table to table, explaining every crayon sun and stick figure. For a little while, I let myself focus only on her voice. Then I heard my name spoken in a different tone nearby. Near the juice table, a small cluster of parents had formed around Jenna. She told them she was in a transitional chapter, that she was honoring her desire to date, while I was struggling to let go of control. She said it lightly, like a funny anecdote. A few parents laughed. One asked if I was okay with that, as if we were talking about flooring choices. Jenna answered for me, saying I was trying, but still very attached to old rules. I stood a few steps away, close enough to hear her words, but far enough that no one could say I had interrupted. I watched one father's face change slightly as she described our home like a test lab for theories he had only seen in podcasts. His eyes went to Leah, who sat on the floor sipping juice, her shoulders a little too stiff for a child. After the teacher finished her talk, people drifted toward the exit. The father, who had looked uneasy, came over to me while Jenna was surrounded by another circle. He spoke without looking directly at me, his gaze on Leah's drawing in my hand. He said quietly that he had heard Jenna talk and that he hoped I knew I did not have to agree to everything just because it sounded modern. He said his own parents had split when they tried to open things up, and it had been the children who paid. I thanked him and did not ask for more. I already had plenty. On the way out, by the door, I took out my phone and wrote a short note in the follow-up thread. School event, Jenna framing me as controller, father's comment about open arrangements and kids. I pressed send as Leah tugged my sleeve to show me a craft project hanging on the wall. At home that night, the air felt thick. Jenna complained that I had stood there like a ghost at the event, said I had made her look crazy by not smiling more while she explained our new dynamic. She asked if I understood how backward I sounded to people when I refused to support her exploration. I answered with the same line I had been holding for weeks. I told her I would not live in a marriage where one person was dating others. I said it calmly, with no raised volume, no extra words. She rolled her eyes and said I needed help. Leah watched from the hallway, half hidden behind the edge of the door, hugging her stuffed animal. When Jenna saw her, she changed tone in an instant, telling Leah that Mom and Dad were just talking about different ideas and that everything would be fine once Dad relaxed. Leah did not look convinced. Later, when the apartment got quiet, I went to the small home office nook again. I opened the binder marked Household and checked that the latest printed account summaries were in their plastic sleeves. Behind them, in a thin pocket, lay the USB stick with the date written small on one side. I closed it and slid the binder back, making sure it lined up with the others labeled Home, Auto, Bank. Then I opened my laptop and checked the folders Archive A and Archive B. Screenshots, videos, voice notes, and text summaries sat in neat lines, more organized than my own thoughts. A small cloud icon pulsed and then flashed "File uploaded successfully" when the latest clip from the gym finished syncing. I watched the message fade and felt a strange, quiet steadiness settle in. It was like seeing a bridge appear in the fog, piece by piece. A few days after that, I stayed late at the office. The building emptied around me until only the cleaning crew and the hum of the vending machine remained. When my calendar notification meeting, personal, courtyard 7:30 p.m. popped up, I closed my work tabs and took the elevator down to the parking garage instead. The concrete space was mostly empty, lit by long fluorescent tubes. I sat in my car with the engine off, the silence so complete I could hear each breath. Then I put my headphones in and scrolled to the contact in my phone that now showed only a small, neutral emoji instead of a name. When the call connected, I spoke in low, measured sentences. I described schedules, living space, Leah's routine, the length of time I had been noting events. I used simple words: documents, arrangements, plans, stability. On the other end, the voice stayed calm, asking about dates, about patterns, about what I wanted for Leah's day-to-day life. We talked about what could be done formally and step by step, about how to act in a way that kept things quiet on the surface while building something solid underneath. No titles, no official labels, just the outline of a process that would not live in group chats or rooftop toasts. When the call ended, my recent calls list showed only the small emoji and a duration. The garage felt less like a hollow space and more like a waiting room. When I got home that night, Jenna was on the couch, lit by the glow of the television and her phone. She said I had been out late and asked if I had finally gone to a therapist to fix my control issues. Her tone was half mocking, half curious. I said I had been making plans. She laughed and asked if I was still planning how to stop her from living. Leah was already in bed. Her door closed. The wall planner behind Jenna showed the red circle and the yellow sticky note "Bring forms," both still in place. I walked farther into the room and stopped at a distance that felt safe. I told her, in a calm voice, that I was done arguing in circles. I said I would not fight with her in front of Leah anymore. I would not explain my boundaries to friends who treated them as jokes, and I would not try to win against her posts and stories. I told her whatever needed to happen next would not be decided on our couch or on Nora's rooftop. I said I would handle it properly. She narrowed her eyes and asked what that meant, whether I was threatening her. I did not answer the question. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I took it out and saw a new calendar reminder slide onto the screen. Meeting, personal, school pickup, 3:10 p.m., set for the same day as the red circle. Just beneath it, a small banner from my cloud app flickered. File uploaded successfully. The vibration, the red circle on the wall, and the quiet message about my files lined up in my mind like three small lights on a runway. Jenna turned back to her show, muttering something about me being dramatic. I dismissed the notifications, slid the phone back into my pocket, and understood that the collecting phase was over. The next time our story changed shape, it would not be because of something she posted. It would be because paper, not wine and attention, finally had its turn to speak. The day of the red circle, I left Leah with my mother and drove to the school early, parking facing the street. I waited near the gate, hands in my pockets, while children's voices echoed on the other side of the fence. Jenna arrived with her phone in her hand and sunglasses on, ready to perform another version of our story. Before she could see me, a neutral man in a plain jacket approached, said her name, and handed her a thick envelope. She opened it, saw divorce, temporary orders, custody schedule, and then the school bell rang for dismissal.